I see people using AI in a lot of different ways, but you have to decide what's right for you because it's very much a ubiquitous technology. But I believe that a lot of entrepreneurs kind of see it as like the social media.
Welcome back to another exciting episode. It means this episode is the number third episode of Paul Claxton's story. In previous two episodes, you seen that how a military person became an entrepreneur, and after that, he's helping businesses to grow overnight. And now in this episode, you will get to know how you can raise seed money for your businesses. How can you pitch your ideas to venture capitals around the globe, and Paul Claxton will going to share his experience with you guys. So do watch the whole episode. If we compare your VC company with other VC companies, we see that you are working for noble causes. You are utilizing your fund for noble causes. So why this difference? Why you are working for noble causes, number one. And lastly, you don't like to invest on those projects like crypto or any other startups which can give you profit, long-term profits.
So I talk a lot about there's a lot of things that I talk about. It's venture capital. Why is the failure rate so high in venture capital? Why are the statistics so poorly? They say like 80 or 90% of companies fail. There's a few things. So like venture capital by nature is misunderstood. Founders seem to think that, oh, the first thing that I should do is incorporate my company, check, um, do a pitch deck, check, right. And there's like this unspoken checklist that you're supposed to do, and like there's no checklist to building a company. So part of that checklist is get the pitch deck right, and then after the pitch deck, pitch investors all day. Like, I'm so sorry, but that is not like raising capital. It's very transactional. I get it all the time. Like, people come to me and that I don't know, and they pitch me, and I'm like, they don't even know anything about me. And I call it the celebrity epidemic of, the venture capital celebrity epidemic. Um, you know, they don't know anything about me, right? They just see venture capital and they're like, they must have money, and I'm building something so special. It's kind of like the narcissist syndrome. Like, I'm building something so special, and like they should, like, why wouldn't they want to respond to me, type of thing. But what a lot of founders seem to forget is that, just in America, I think there are about 80,000 startups in just in America alone, right? Um, so, across the world, um, there's even more. Right? There's like 200 million startups across the world. That's crazy. Like, there are more than, I just looked it up here. There are more than 150 million startups, almost 200 million, of which 82,000 are in the United States. So by and large, the majority of startups are not even in the United States. But, the most of the funding that comes into the industry actually comes from the US. So it's actually really, really um, just pure bombardment for like me and other venture capitalists, um, being a US VC. Like, I mean, I get startups from all over the world pitching me, but they don't know anything about me. And it's like, you know, since when did, the role of VC like become so impersonal? Like, I'm just viewed as I'm not even viewed as a person anymore. It's just like, um, I'm viewed as just like this way to, like this institution, like a bank, like someone's going to a bank, but it's a person. Like, so if you want something, if you're just looking for money, go to a bank or a third party lender. It's not about the relationship at that point. It's purely about, is your business profitable? That's all it's about at that point. Um, you know, I mean, banks don't lend on faith. So if you can bootstrap your business to a point of profit, go get debt funding from a bank. But if you're going to go to a venture capitalist, build a relationship, And so there's this status quo that they should pitch venture capital, and I'd like to change that. And I wish the SEC, um, and various regulatory institutions across the world would crack down on these things more, because honestly, I see so many founders and startups breaking laws, like solicitation laws, and like I really wish the SEC would crack down on it more. And I think that would be a good starting point to the industry being taken more seriously, to founders being taken more seriously, and venture capitalists actually taking founders more seriously, is that founders were better regulated, by law, because a lot of founders are just pitching and they're breaking laws, and they're hiring people on success and commissions to go raise money from people who aren't brokers. And if you're they don't know, like, you can research any of this. It's all over the internet. Just research before you go start raising capital, and understand the right way to raise capital, and why we shouldn't hire brokers, why maybe we might want to work with a VC to syndicate our deal, which is what I do a lot of. So that part of the industry is misunderstood in terms of what venture capitalists are. Now, the other part of the industry is venture capitalists misunderstand entrepreneurship, and that happens um, when you have people that, you know maybe they had a high paying job at, a large investment bank. I don't know, let's say Goldman Sachs or Morgan Stanley, or at some, front page, blue chip Silicon Valley company, like, Amazon, or, Facebook, TikTok, whatever. And they had a high paying job there, right? And they had enough money, they were young. And because a lot of these engineers, they're making like $300,000-$400,000 a year, but they're fresh out of school, so they're young. They don't have a big family or expenses, and that's the culture, right? Because I've worked at hyper growth startups before I became an entrepreneur, and that's the culture, is to hire them young, and so many times, they don't have a huge family or a lot of obligations, and so they're able to take some of that salary and invest, right? And then they stumble upon an exit, right? And so then they say, well, I've got all this money. I had this win, I exited, but they didn't build anything. So, but then they want to become a venture capitalist, um, but they didn't build anything, right? And then their whole career is kind of driven on the people that they met in that high tech industry, that investment banking industry. And some of them do very well, but it doesn't necessarily, having an exit driven mindset, not an impact driven mindset, doesn't necessarily help the founders out. And it doesn't necessarily help generate better returns overall for the industry. Because when you're exit driven, focused, return driven, which by nature VCs are, because we have to make our portfolio return in terms of just good stewardship, capital stewardship for our limited partners and those who invest in us, right? But then we double down on winners, and I don't think that that's a good approach, because if you had a child who makes straight A's, was on every sports team, varsity, had no problem, dating, girls or whatever, if, but then you have this other child that makes F's every report card. You know, they're just they're failing in every aspect of their young childhood, adulthood. Which one are you going to pay attention? Are you going to double down on the kid that's doing well, or are you going to pay attention to the kid that's having problems, right? And for the parents that want their child to make it to the pro leagues or be, some superstar, those, and we've seen this happen with like the Jackson Five, like their parents, Michael Jackson's parents were like, they were really like pressing their kids to be these superstars, right? And Michael Jackson was the one that got the most pressure, but then you had the other kids that didn't get as much attention, right? And so it's kind of the same thing, right? But how good could those kids have been if maybe they got more attention, but for whatever reason, Michael was always the star of the show, right? And so I believe if we focus more on supporting our VCs, focus more on supporting startups operationally, um, then we would have less companies failing within an existing portfolio, and we wouldn't have this. The venture capital industry wouldn't be known for having one or two companies in a portfolio that make the whole fund. You know, we have all of our companies doing better than average, and then we have a couple of great companies too. Instead of a one company that makes the whole fund and the rest of the companies are subpar, right? And so I believe that approach works, and that's why I built this full stack slash venture studio model to support companies, founders, both pre-investment, during investment, and post-investment, because it really is about not writing checks only, but it is about supporting the entire entrepreneurial founder community. Even if you're not a fit for our thesis, we can support you operationally. Everything that a VC would do, maybe we don't write the check, but we can absolutely help add credibility in that VC investing knowledge of how to structure a cap table, how to do that, and how to position you and build the right narrative around you and support you operationally as well, so that as a founder, you're not out raising capital, which is not what you should be doing. You should be building your company. You should have someone internally, like the CFO example I gave before, at least like an internal financial, markets expert, to come in and, to build your, to run your cap table, right? To do that. And then, you continue, so delegate where appropriately, essentially, is what I'm saying. And I think, and I say this a lot, but I think if a founder is connected to a great VC firm, again, partner, that founder should never have to go raise capital again. That VC should bring enough investment value, as long as that founder is hitting all milestones. We don't finance failure, but as long as that founder is hitting all milestones, that founder should never have to go raise capital. That VC should have enough upstream and downstream co-investing partners that that founder is set. So to me, that's what building a good VC firm is, and being a thought leader.
So now, Paul, I will going to detrack you a little bit because we have a surprise rapid fire round for you. So the number one question is, one skill you wish you learned earlier in your career.
What is the one skill that I wish I knew earlier? How to deal with different personalities in business, because like I'm very, very diligent, and everyone is very diligent within their own personality. But the hardest thing is managing relationships in business. And I've gotten better at it, but I wish I was much better at it earlier on.
That is very interesting. Now tell me, which habit boomed you as a person in terms of in professional career or in your personal life?
The habit that I changed was just not expecting so much out of people that are not, they're not willing to give it. Like, so my dad used to always say, so like, your expectations can be up here, but everyone's expectations of themselves are like down here, and they're just never going to be up here, right? And so it's like, you can't expect, if you drive a Honda Civic, you can't expect that car to get up off the line at from 0 to 60 in like 5 seconds. It's not happening. You can't expect that Honda Civic to do 175 miles an hour top speed. It's not happening. That's just not what the car is built for. And so just understanding that people are built, everyone's built different ways for different reasons, and everyone has something that they're good at.
Okay, so any fictional character that you want to play in your real life?
Not really. I really like being myself, but I would say if there was a fictional character that I've always really loved and admired is Superman.
Which thing you like to do most in your free time?
After being an entrepreneur for so long, I enjoy my personal time to myself. There's two things that I enjoy doing. I like sitting at I love writing about AI, the industry, really about anything. I do a lot of writing on AI and venture capital. But I would also like, to write maybe some some stories about my life one day too. So I love just putting on my headphones, grabbing a cup of coffee or a glass of wine, and just maybe even having a cigar. I like cigars, Monte Cristos, um, and just sitting there writing. On a nice, beautiful day. The other thing that I like doing in my free time is working out. I love to work out.
So this is the end of our rapid fire round, and we had a lot of things to discuss. But before leaving, any message for aspiring people, those people who are struggling and juggling, and they're fighting their battle, how they can get success?
One thing that I wish I did when I was younger, you know, so when you're a teenager, you think the world's never going to end. And then, like, all of a sudden, you turn 18. And at least in America, when you turn 18, I mean, you're an adult, right? So it's time life gets real, um, and you kind of stumble around, a lot in your early 20s. And, um, quite honestly, I think that the adult age should be raised to 25, um, because the human mind and the human body doesn't even stop growing, for until you're like around 23, 24. So I think people should become adults at 25. Like, if you're still growing when you're 18, 19, 20, you know. But unfortunately, for many of us, life is just thrown at us. I joined the Marine Corps at 18. Um, so, and on top of that, when a lot of people don't get a chance to be a kid when they're a kid, yeah, in high school, it's all about performance, and you're working and you're trying to make straight A's, and, you're working hard at that. Um, but you still, like, didn't really get a chance to fully just enjoy being a kid, without having to worry about someone, telling you what to do, where to go, and this and that. So I believe, and I wish I had done this, but in my early 20s, before I became an entrepreneur, I wish I had spent about a year, maybe 2 years, just doing nothing but partying and blowing money. So just to get it out of my system, and then from there, you know just get to know people, have a good time, spend a year or two just doing nothing but that, right? And then from there, forget what everyone else, forget everything that you know, and what everyone else has told you that you should be, and follow your heart. Spend every waking moment like trying your heart out and exploring and experimenting, you know. And it's better to do that and to find yourself at that age than to realize when you're in your 30s or 40s or 50s that I don't like my life, because I don't feel like my life is my life. Like, everyone has told me what I should be, they've told me what to be, and now I don't even know who I am, you know. And fortunately, I realized that, um, I spent 10 years in the Marines, but everyone was, my dad was telling me to stay in the Marines, but I'm so glad that I got out, because it, like, I didn't have the passion to be a Marine anymore. So, like, at least on in terms of a job, I'm always a Marine, but in terms of a job. So, I'm so glad that I got out and I chose to follow my heart, and I spent some time in corporate, but I finally made the realization that, like, my heart's not in it, and the sooner you do that, the better. And I wish I had I wish I had realized that, in my 20s. Now, I wanted to be in the Marine Corps. Um, But I think the time that I was ready to get out was probably when I was like 26 or 27. I was probably ready to get out at that point. Um, but unfortunately, when you join the Marine Corps, you're bound by a contract, so there is no getting out. So when you sign up, you're in there for 4 years, so you're stuck. But when 28 came, I was almost 29. I exercised my option to get out. So, and I guess you could say 3 years of my time in the Marine Corps I spent in Iraq, through all of my 4 tours. But I guess you could say I did actually spend probably about a year just kind of partying after I got out and stuff. I mean, I was still working, so I wasn't just partying and just, you know, but I was still like kind of, getting it out of my system, so to speak, I guess you could say. I actually spent a few years on that, but eventually you have to get serious about where you want to go with life. So that time for me came at about 33 years old, 34 years old. So, yep.
So thank you so much, Paul, for your precious time, and I hope you guys going to like the podcast. And do remember, you are the captain of your ship. Uh, Things will come in your way, but you have to overcome. You have to find the ways. You have to find the solutions, and after that, you will get success. So keep watching and keep daring and keep achieving. We will be going to meet you in the next podcast. Till then, take care. Bye bye.